Greetings, my friends. Mike Wan here. Gregorian calendar date September 12th. Gregorian calendar year 2025. And we are in part 2 of Burning Man 2025. And the truth of the matter is this. I had been preparing the slides in this presentation of part 2 of a video I put out about 7 days ago when the news reports of Charlie Kirk being shot hit the airwaves, and that certainly changed things. Maybe not so much changed things, but at least added another element to what I was already planning on talking about. And as we're going to soon see, that there is a continuity. So it probably doesn't take a Nostradamus to be able to assume that the news story of Charlie Kirk is going to be a turning point in terms of how life is lived, similar to the original 9/11, similar to COVID, where events actually changed the way which we lived, at least here in the United States. Well, actually, that's not true. All over Earth, life changed after both of those events. This too may be one of those events, and it's fair to assume that that will happen. And like 9/11 and like COVID, this event is filled with shadow language. And what we will see, or what I'm going to be adding into this presentation, which I originally was not planning to include, is how this is part of perhaps a larger theme in which I've been talking about. So I'm going to go back to August 8th when I released a video entitled "When the Earth's Core Shifts, Strange Things Happen." And in that video, I talked about the geodynamic breakout. I talked about Gettysburg, which resonates with the idea of civil war. And I also talked about death. Now, what I'm doing here today, or the purpose of this video, isn't so much to go deep into the decoding. That's just more or less conspiratorial entertainment. And when it is just purely entertainment, it loses its medicine. What we're trying to do here is to identify and to spell out and to understand the dreamlike elements in play. And the purpose of all of this is finding your bearings. Very similar to the concept of the totem, which was used in the movie Inception. So in our video today, I'm going to talk about the shadow realm. I'm going to talk about humans as story beings, talk a little bit about Hollywood. It has both a revelation of the method, or a tool for creating reality, or possibly both. Then we're going to switch back to Burning Man. What exactly is Burning Man? And then we're going to look deeper into the shadow language of events that have occurred between August 15th, 2025 and September 10th. Before I get into this portion, I want to give a little bit of foreshadowing as to where we're going to go, and just point out one of the shadow themes, which is very evident, or that I'm at least following or will be talking about today. And we're going to begin by looking at or making reference to the August 22nd murder of Irina Zarutska, the Ukrainian who was stabbed in the neck in Charlotte, North Carolina. And then on September 30th, Vadim Kruglov, who is the man who was murdered at Burning Man. This information was not available at the release of Burning Man 2025 Part 1, but Vadim was murdered by having his throat slashed. His throat was cut, and Vadim is Russian. That took place at Black Rock City. And then on September 10th, Charlie Kirk, who is arguably was a living symbol of traditional American values, he was shot in the neck in just outside of Salt Lake City, the city of the Latter-day Saints. So that's where we're going to eventually go towards, but let's take a couple steps back and go into shadow realm. So in the first part, I made the distinction between the term shadow language and twilight language. And my use of shadow language was more encompassing of twilight language because it included a portion of this subliminal or subconscious language which is not created by other human beings. And I use the term shadow language very purposefully because this is a shadow realm. Let's be crystal clear. This is a shadow realm. I don't use that phrase in a sensationalist sort of way. I mean it in the fact that shadow refers to unknown, or to describe something unknown, secret, or hidden, stemming from the physical reality that shadows are obscured from the light. And this realm where we are having our life experience is a hidden, secret shadow realm. Perhaps this is also, I'm saying the same thing which the idea of Maya as illusion has been used historically in Vedic culture. So why do I say this is a shadow realm? Well, first is because you and me and all of us, our conscious aware mind is controlled or influenced by hidden shadow urges and desires. This is the basis of modern psychological analysis or psychoanalysis. And it's credited with Sigmund Freud with this, of the concept that we're all driven by unconscious desires. So that means all of us are kind of living in this shadow experience within ourselves. But then it goes deeper, because there is purposeful and unintentional communication to the shadow, to the hidden part of our consciousness that is occurring all the time. And so the unintentional communication is body language and all these things that we do that we're not aware of that we're doing when we're communicating. You know, that's part of what the human experience is. But there is very, very purposeful communication, which is also always happening to communicate with our shadow drivers. And so this could be neuro-linguistic programming, both done in a way to serve you, but then also neuro-linguistic programming done in a way to manipulate you. This is advertising, like both subliminal advertising techniques, but then also just regular advertising. The reason why there's so many Tide commercials, which really don't really seem to add anything to the value of Tide, it's because it is trying to communicate and establish itself deeply within your subconscious. We're constantly being bombarded in our the shadow portions of our consciousness with the desire by those communicators in an attempt to influence us in ways that we're unaware that we're being influenced. But the third and the biggest shadow is the big thing. Like, this is all a mystery. Where are we? What is this place? How did we get here? That is unknown. Certainly there are many, many, many stories trying to answer that. But for the most part, the human experience in the modern world is like, don't even think about those sort of questions. You just focus on what you do know, which is this is how you get your job. This is how you pay your bills. This is how you pay your taxes. This is how you take your trip to Disneyland. This is how you get your Wi-Fi access. This is how you watch your Netflix shows. So when I say this is a shadow realm, this is no surprise. It's always been a shadow realm. There should be no sort of fear or negative response. We are just laying out the obvious. And when you begin to understand how shadow works in the individual person, in you, within me, within all of us, is that once the hidden, the shadow begins to become clear to the conscious mind, much of this shadow's influence collapses upon itself. So being aware of the shadow, or being aware of shadow communications, without necessarily being emotionally charged or triggered by them, is a means of deactivating them. And it's part of what we're doing. And as we go through this process, as we allow these shadows to collapse, these shadow stories to collapse, without judgment, meaning preference or not preference, I like it, I don't like it, I agree with it, I don't agree with it, but with discernment, this is what's happening, this is what's not happening, we begin to find ourselves standing on more solid ground. I mean, again, this is still a big unknown. This is like Inception. What we're trying to do is figure out where and whose dream we're participating in. So now let's go on to the next part of the video, which is human beings as story beings. We are story beings, or said another way, our consciousness works in story form. A narrative is the telling of a connected series of events, whether real or imagined, often conveying meaning and emotion through a story. Humans think in story form because our brains are use a hardwired network to organize incoming information into narratives. The story mode of thinking helps us understand experiences, build empathy, and remember important information by structuring events in a coherent meaning sequence. So yes, all of that is true. And yes, there's stories which we tell ourselves, and that is true. But then there are also literal stories, movies, books, videos like this, news stories. They're all stories. And these stories, because we're story beings, because we think in story form, they begin to resonate or to entrance within us. And they take home very naturally. And now we tie this into the shadow aspect of ourselves. Like, these stories begin to, or at least have the potentiality to entrance us beneath our conscious awareness, whereas we begin to act out these stories. These stories begin to influence our conscious thinking and our behaviors in ways that we are unaware of. Now, that concept should be relatively easy to grasp, but to take it all the way could be scary, or at least for some people. This is because it is a shadow realm and we have a blind spot. We all have a blind spot, and what that blind spot is what is going on in our shadow. How big is our shadow? How deep does it go? And to think that you understand your blind spot, to think that you know the parameters of your blind spot, is nothing short of hubris, of arrogance. And this is another attribute of how the shadow works. The more convinced you are that you are not influenced by shadow influences, the stronger its influence becomes. It's the antithesis of when you see the subliminal shadow communication as it is, well, then it begins to collapse itself. So the denying of it and the seeing of it are two sides of the same coin. So in the contemporary context, in the here and now, Hollywood is arguably the greatest storyteller. They have the best writers, they have the best technologies, they have the best distribution of the stories. And you probably have heard the concept that Hollywood is a play on the term or the words Hollywood, as in the type of material used by the Druids' magic wand. So this implies all sorts of different things, right? Like, one, that the Druids had working magic wands, that it was a real thing, and maybe that the hands behind the scenes, behind the curtains of Hollywood, that they're Druids or they're using magic. The question of, Hollywood as a play on the Hollywood of a magic wand, you have to ask yourself, how much of this is metaphor and how much of this is a literal statement? Realistically, I don't know those answers. I find it a very, very curious type of question to ask, and a means or a perspective of viewing Hollywood product, but let's go a little bit deeper. So, Hollywood stories as means of creating reality, as means of magic, and this continuum of what the Hollywood metaphor can mean, like the continuum, like how real is this magic? I want to begin by making reference to the 1997 movie called Wag the Dog. And this was a huge Hollywood movie in terms of the individuals tied to it. A-list actors such as Dustin Hoffman, Robert De Niro were the stars of it. Barry Levinson, one of the most honored and respected directors within the Hollywood establishment, is behind it. And in this movie, they very, very clearly lay out how on the highest levels of the federal government, in the movie it takes place from the presidential level, that the deep state architects behind the day-to-day unfoldings of government utilize Hollywood trickery and the mainstream media to literally create stories out of the blue to affect and impact the public awareness. I mean, this is a straight up mea culpa of like, this is how the world works. And this came right out, like, in public. Like, this was not like the stories behind Eyes Wide Shut, where Stanley Kubrick was murdered because he was revealing something which was not meant to be revealed to the public. Like, no, this was completely meant to be revealed to the public. Like, yeah, this is how the stories are are fabricated, and this is how fake things can be. This is particularly this movie is particularly interesting in light of the modern times, in light of what is just happening the last couple of days, and the fact that you can't trust what you see. And it was assumed that back in 1997, there was no AI. There was, the internet was just in its beginnings. So this movie was saying that that this was happening before, when the technology, when green screen technology was thought of as to be cutting edge technology. So, yeah, like, is this a type of magic? Is this a type of Hollywood creating reality? Certainly. Let's go a little bit deeper. So this is a little bit, this one next piece is a little bit less grounded. I don't know if this is accurate or not, but it certainly seems accurate. And I'm going to share with you a essay which is on, I don't even know how to pronounce this, Scribd? Is that what you call the website? It's called the James Cameron Conspiracy Theory. It was uploaded February 11th, 2010. I can remember reading it back then, and it really had an impact on me. Again, I don't know if this is accurate or not, but it certainly seems like it could be. And in this article, or in this essay, the author basically says that James Cameron was under the guidance of a bunch of Freemasons known as the Dentists, who funded and influenced him early on in his career in the movies he was making in the 80s, like The Terminator, Aliens, and Stranger Days. And he was utilizing, at the time, new filmmaking light technology, like ways of utilizing light, to apply MK Ultra techniques discovered by Ewan Cameron. It's unclear whether or not James Cameron and Ewan Cameron are the same, or from the same family line. But the idea behind this theory, the idea behind this essay, is that, yeah, like, built into Hollywood movies isn't just like regular subliminal advertising, or just the way that stories can influence the people who watch them. But no, there's specific techniques built into the filmmaking technology which are meant to influence the audience in very, very similar ways in which the MK Ultra techniques were used by back in the 60s and 70s and so forth. So that's a level, another level into the Hollywood-like ability to create magic by creating reality. But I want to bring up a very specific movie right now, because this points to something else. And on a personal level, this movie, the first time I saw it, I don't know when I first saw it, I've never really been able to put down the idea behind it, because it was so thought-provoking. So the movie is called Stranger Than Fiction. Perhaps you've seen it, perhaps you haven't. If you haven't, it's somewhere between the movie, if Truman Show and Chocolat, if you could imagine these two movies coming together. Truman Show, which I'm certain many of you are aware of and have seen, is one of those movies that when you watch it, you should be asking yourself, how true is this? How literal is the Truman Show? Is it a metaphor, or is it an actual literal explanation of this is what's going on? I don't think you can come to a conclusion. I don't think we can know, but we can begin to realize and ask these questions, which I think in its own self is very valuable. But then also, Stranger Than Fiction has a certain rom-com and fantasy sort of element, which is like Chocolat. And Chocolat, if you haven't seen that movie, I would highly recommend that movie. I watch movies first and foremost to see what is being communicated, and then secondly, maybe I like it, maybe I don't like it. Then my preferences come into play. Obviously, I would prefer to watch a movie that I enjoy watching, but I watch a lot of movies, or I've seen a lot of movies that to their conclusion, even though I don't like the movie. But Chocolat, I like that movie, so I'd recommend that to many of you. But back to Stranger Than Fiction. So Stranger Than Fiction stars Will Ferrell, and he kind of plays a romantic lead in it, which is, I don't know, you decide whether or not you thought it worked or not. But the description online is he's a mentally unstable IRS auditor, and he hears an author's voice in his head, and he discovers he is the ill-fated protagonist in her latest work. While a book company employee tries to cure the author's case of writer's block, the auditor and the professor set out to find the woman and make her change the story, or her story. So what happens in this movie is it's supposedly, it's not supposed to take place in a fantasy realm. It's not like Lord of the Rings. It's not like any of these movies where it's implied that there is an element of fantasy. So you should loosen your mental faculties to accept the fantasy nature into the storytelling. This movie is presented like, no, this is regular reality, just like you watching the screen in the audience. And what it says is that these two people, regular folks who don't know each other, are somehow connected. And somehow this woman who is an author, a storyteller, is influencing this other guy's life. And he has no idea about her stories at all. And so what struck me as so curious about watching this movie was the fact that, how much do stories go to influence lives? And then also this idea of how things are related and not related. Hollywood or the movies are clear that sometimes they're literal explanations and sometimes they're metaphorical, and we don't quite know, particularly in these kind of liminal spaces of topics. And so that's why I've held on to this for a long time, this idea of how influenced are we by stories that we don't even know? What is the nature of this reality? To me, this movie points more to the concept of quantum entanglement than anything else. But in the analysis of this movie, they try to explain the mechanisms of control, or why is it that this author was able to influence this other person's life. And it says, well, they had a shared reality. And it said that just because she was writing it, somehow it was able to influence the real life force that controls the Will Ferrell character's actions in life. At no point does the movie explain this. At no point does it go any deeper than that. It's just presenting this idea as if it was a foregone conclusion as to this is how reality works. And again, I'm bringing this up now. Well, I guess I'm bringing this up now. You'll see in a moment. But I want to continue. Well, actually, no, I guess I'm going to bring it up right now. In part one, it began with the death. I began with the retelling of the death of Andre Kutcher, and I told that story of learning about Andre Kutcher's death on the Day of the Dead, and how when I first heard of it, I could not shake the idea that his murder sounded just like a song lyric I had been thinking about for for decades. Not thinking about deeply, but have been curious many, many times of this lyric of "I shot a man in Reno just to watch him die," and then added to the fact that the online description, the story told by one of the local Reno, Nevada news stations, it did not read like a news report. It read like a movie treatment. And that took my curiosity. It captured my curiosity because I have been holding this idea, questioning the depth of stranger than fiction, and this idea of stories and real life and how that interplay takes place. Again, I'm not implying that I have an answer. I'm just recognizing that this is a question and an inquiry worthy of leaning into, particularly for those of us who are interested in not being a human resource in someone else's dream. So, okay. Let's link these two movies, Stranger Than Fiction and Wag the Dog. They were released 10 years apart from one another, seemingly have nothing to do with one another, other than the fact that the same actor plays the same archetype in these two films, and that is Dustin Hoffman. Here he is in Stranger Than Fiction, and here he is in Wag the Dog. And this character, this archetype, his purpose is he is walking the liminal space between fiction and reality. He is dealing with this idea between when does fiction become reality, and how does reality, what is that dance? The exact same thing that we're talking about right now. And what we're doing in this video isn't just talking about it philosophically. We are actually looking at the actions and the stories of our modern time and beginning to disentangle some of this, the knottedness in it. In Wag the Dog and Stranger Than Fiction, Dustin Hoffman plays characters who manipulate or interpret narratives for their own purposes, blurring the line between fiction and reality. Despite their vastly different professions and personalities, Stanley Motz and Professor Jules Hilbert exist on a meta level to influence the story of another character. They're both narrative experts. They both blur the lines of reality, and they both challenge the perceptions of authenticity. And in many ways, we're doing this here today. And then this idea gets even more personal for me, and I've talked about this many times over the years, because I personally have had a very, very strange relationship with Christopher Nolan films. I'm not suggesting that Christopher Nolan films were made for me personally, but there is a personal bleed through which is probability-wise really slim, that continues to happen between my actual life and these films, which again which begs to ask the question, what is the relationship between Hollywood, between films, between stories, and actual lived experiences? So the three places, I've got three very, very specific occurrences where the Christopher Nolan films have bled through for me. One is the movie Interstellar in the watch. The second is the movie Tenet in the car. Third is the movie The Prestige in a package I received in the mail. So in Interstellar, The watch, if you've seen it, is a main plot device, and it is used as a tool to demonstrate time travel. And the watch, here it is, you can see them using the watch, and the watch is a very specific watch, and it's made by the Hamilton Watch Company. And this here is my watch, and I've owned this watch before the release of the movie Interstellar. Same thing happened with the movie Tenet. In the movie Tenet, the Saab 9.5 vehicle is highly significant in terms of relaying concepts of time manipulation. And I happen to drive a Saab 9.5. This here's a picture of, I don't drive it anymore, but here's a picture of it from Google Earth, which is also strange that Google Earth has it. And then this is the car from Tenet. It's not the same year, but it's the same color and it's the same model. Again, what does this say? I'm not saying that there is a hard conclusion. All I'm doing is I'm recognizing what, I'm using this phrase in the loosest sense, that there's quantum entanglement. There's quantum entanglement with Hollywood and movies. So, okay. The last thing I want to get into before I get into the workings of Burning Man, or the part 2 of Burning Man 2025, is what exactly is Burning Man? I haven't gone. I'm not really interested in going. I'm not really charged one way or the other about it. I know a lot of people in my life who have gone to it. Some of them have their identification tied just to going to Burning Man. But, I've heard the stories. I've seen how it has had a very, very strong impact on them. So that's more or less my experience with Burning Man personally. But I also recognize Burning Man for what it is, which is a highly creative a gathering of tens of thousands of people who are highly creative, who are all on the same page of maybe magical thinking and magic practices. They are experiencing a coherent group mind through music and drugs. They're literally in the wilderness, and narrative changing behaviors is built into Burning Man, and there is a clear and focused climax to the event. Like, I can see very clearly that this is a potent event, and its influence is very strong and deep on popular culture. Maybe not necessarily directly, but indirectly for Burning Man, and particularly the avant-garde creators that go to it tend to be influencing of the less avant-garde creators who have a stronger influence on mainstream popular culture. But where I'm really interested, or what I want to add into this, and what I haven't really spoken too much so far, is the relationship between Burning Man and AI. Because as what's being described right now with the debates on the shooting of Charlie Kirk, is AI is now in the discussion in a way that AI was not in the discussion back on September 11th, 2001. And now it's even more, the murkiness of the shadow realm is even more dense. The murkiness is more dense, and then the potentiality of everything being fake that you see online or even offline, is that potentiality is a real thing. So it's at this point that I want to go and say, go to the link which is in the notes on Gumroad. My course, Grounding Consciousness, is designed specifically for understanding how to move through this shadow realm to find as grounded of a reality as you can get. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this on the back end of the video, but I wanted to add this in the middle. So now we're going to switch up and we're going to go on to the Burning Man timeline, but we're going to expand it a little bit. This is the timeline I showed in part 1, and now we're going to expand it to August 15th, 2025, and concluded on September 10th. So August 15th, BlackRock CEO becomes the co-chair of the World Economic Forum. I'm assuming if you're watching this video, and I'm assuming if you're this deep in this video, you understand all about BlackRock and what BlackRock is in terms of financial institution that's hidden behind everything, which owns, everything. And then also what the World Economic Forum is, Klaus Schwab, and the World Economic Forum's influence on the events of COVID. And so now we see on August 15th that these two overlap. Whereas Klaus Schwab has left his leadership role of the organization which he founded, and now the head of the BlackRock CEO, Larry Fink, is now the new head. And Schwab has always been part of this whole sort of like weird, shadowy Hollywood sort of stuff, because he looks just like Dr. Evil, right? The alter ego of spy Austin Powers. You can't make this up. This is part of the narrative where he told this is Hollywood, and then this is really happening. Right? And the other name associated, Andre Hoffman, I'm just at least going to throw it in because Andre Kutcher is where our story began of this Burning Man two-part series. I'm just going to mention it. Sometimes a broken clock is right. Maybe there's more. Who knows? But both are named Andre. And remember, Austin Powers taught us that the same individual plays both the spy and the villain. Remember, it's Michael Myers, who is both the villain and the spy. Michael Myers, Mike Myers. The shadow language wordplay is just layers and layers and layers deep. Blackstone, BlackRock, most evil companies in the world, Dr. Evil, all this sort of stuff. But let's go into BlackRock because we're talking about Burning Man. And one of the shadow charges in the actual event of Burning Man is the fact that it takes place in the Black Rock Desert. They call it Black Rock City. It's literally the same name as Black Rock right here. And the question might come is like, well, what's the Black Rock? There's a lot of different ways which we can go with that, but I'm going to go with this one, is the black stone of is a sacred fragmented rock set in the eastern corner of the Kaaba, the holiest site in Islam, in Mecca, in Saudi Arabia. So this right here, it is part of the Muslim tradition to take a pilgrimage to Mecca at some point in your life, and then go around the Kaaba 7 times, and then the corner of the Kaaba is the black stone. What the black stone is, that's, I'm not really certain. What's it say right here? Is traditionally believed to have fallen from heaven during the time of Adam and Eve. Whatever it is, it exists in this culture. Like, people really do go here. Let's go look at this. Here's a picture of Black Rock City. This certainly reminds me of the way which the people go round and round on the Kaaba. You can see there's a similarity right here in a past Burning Man installation. And, this is probably not new information to a lot of you, this idea of the black stone, and then particularly the black cube of Saturn, and how it's seen throughout Earth, these mysterious black cube these black cube sculptures, and then how this ties into the tefillin, the black cube worn by the Jews, and how they strap it around their arms 7 times, just like the 7 times the Muslims go round and round the Kaaba. All of this is in play. This is all in play, right? So let's continue to move forward. We're doing the timeline. August 15th, that was the day which the BlackRock CEO was released, or the BlackRock CEO becoming the new interim co-chair of World Economic Forum. This is the same day that Trump meets with the Russian leader, Putin. And then 3 days later, Trump meets with the Ukraine leader. Now remember, what are we dealing with? We saw this we brought this up in the very beginning of this video. We're dealing with Ukraine, Russia, and USA deaths by neck wound. And so now we see in play the same archetypes. We got Russia, we got Ukraine, and we got the United States right there. And keep in mind, whatever you want to say about Trump, he's a professional actor. He's got he's been in multiple movies. He's been in multiple TV shows. He's been in the World Wrestling Federation. He's a professional actor. Zelensky, professional actor. Putin, professional spy. Is just like Austin Powers, right? This is all built into this dream which we are in. Like, what is this shadow realm? How deep does it go? How much does this dream, how much is it real? How much is it made to influence reality in your mind so that you act out a certain way? These are not questions that we can answer, but these are questions that we can sit with in order to begin to collapse the effects of the shadow. All right, August 22nd. This is when the Ukrainian girl, Irina Zuruska, I wonder if I'm pronouncing this correctly, she's stabbed in the neck in Charlotte, North Carolina. See, this was a huge story. This garnered all sorts of eyeballs, of people watching it, and then heart space, because people felt all sorts of different ways about it. She is young, she is beautiful, and she's tied to this the Ukrainian-Russian war, which is already deeply emotionally tied. This happens on August 22nd. Then on August 24th, Burning Man begins. August 27th, the baby is born. Keep in mind, the couple who are the parents of baby Aurora, they're from Salt Lake City. Basically the same place as the Charlie Kirk situation. I believe that he was, the university he was at was in Orem, Utah, which is just south of Salt Lake City, but it's the same general area. Let's continue to move forward. August 29th, Pluto goes out of bounds for 1,000 years. Now, this is a big topic, which I'm just kind of dropping in on you right now. I'm going to make a video all about this. Maybe a little bit less astrological and more astronomical and what this may be pointing to. But nonetheless, this was just like the geodynamic breakout, which was covered in the video I released on August 8th. This is another one of these measurable material world events. And what happened is Pluto, because of its orbit, it more or less what is being referred to by the astrological world, because I haven't read anyone in the astronomical world talk about it, but they're describing when Pluto falls more than 23 degrees away from the ecliptic, it's called going out of bounds. There are a lot of implications with that, and that's what the video I'm going to make will cover. But I just want to point out that this did happen in 2020 on August 29th, and Pluto will remain out of bounds or more than the 23 degrees away from the ecliptic for 10 years, and then it will not do that for a couple thousand. It won't do that again for thousands of more years, or at least that's what's being said in the story. And Pluto, as it is an archetype in astrology, is the planet of the hidden, is the planet of the shadow. So this happened on August 29th. And then on the next day is when Vadim Kruglov, the Russian, has his throat slashed, just as the Burning Man effigy reaches or comes into fruition. So now let's move forward to September 10th. We all know the Charlie Kirk story, but probably what's getting a little bit less attention is that Poland downs a Russian drone. So Poland, which is part of NATO, it's right next to Ukraine, it shot down a Russian plane, which was in its airspace. And this is said to be the the closest to war or actual fighting since World War II in Europe. Again, we're dealing with Russia and Ukraine, and this was a big deal. And then obviously we know about the Charlie Kirk story. Now keep in mind, in shadow language, embedded in the Kirk story is a deeper conflict or an older conflict than this Russian-Ukrainian conflict. It is a Crusades type conflict. For Kirk means church. It literally means church. And Charlie Kirk, as a symbolic representation of beliefs, was represented that the belief of America as a Christian nation, and he was wearing a freedom shirt when the events took place on the day before 9/11, which was also branded as a crusades type event of Christian values versus Muslim values. And what was being spoken about at that time in 2001 was that they hate us for our freedom. And there he is wearing a freedom t-shirt, right? And as we link this into Black Rock City and Black Rock connects to the black stone, which is inherently a Islamic concept or an Islamic attribute. So we can see deep in the shadow language of these events, like all of these different conflicts are in play. What's going to happen? We're going to go and see. My guess is, all of the dominoes have been put in place over the past couple weeks, right? Like the federal police forces put in cities, all of the the stuff that's been told in the news has been building an atmosphere and has been literally creating an environment where if something's going to happen, something's going to happen. Now, it certainly looked this way back in the summer of 2022 when COVID took place. No, COVID took place in 2020, excuse me. That the riots associated with the George Floyd, I can't breathe neck event was going to lead to some sort of civil war. It didn't. It fell out. And so this may happen, the same thing may happen here, but we're going to go and see. What is definitely occurring is that these stories are being pushed out right now in a highly, highly exhausted, emotionally and psychologically drained population of sleepwalkers. And so as we go through this and we talk about this in a way where we can point out what's happened, or at least what's being reported. That's what we can say is definitely happening, is what's being reported. We can begin to stand in that space and understand, at least like we saw the Leo DiCaprio character does in the movie Inception, we can begin to realize where we are in the dream and whose dream we are in. So the goal here isn't to figure it out. It's impossible. That's the nature of the shadow realm and the AI paradigm. You're not going to know what's real and what's not real. The goal is to find your bearings amongst the fog. To remain grounded in consciousness as the dream world swirls, to find yourself awake and aware, allowing the dream to collapse the way it should be. So again, this is where I'm going to encourage you to go to my Gumroad website. This course, this grounding consciousness course, is 27 modules of really, really well put together information where you're not going to find anywhere else, information which is not theory, it is not secret information which is downloaded, but actual information which can be used to help you begin to become more firmly established in, at least in consciousness, as the paradigm is going to go through some crazy changes. So with that, my friends, I wrap this up. Thank you for hanging in there with me. Reach out with any sort of questions or comments, and keep your eyes peeled for some other videos which are going to be coming out rather shortly. Take good care. Until then, this is Mike Wan.